Go there. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to let the soundboard guys kind of fix that. Sometimes technology works, sometimes it doesn't work. There we go. And it's working this morning. That is Michelangelo's statue of Moses. I don't know if you've ever seen that before. If you look closely at it, it looks like Moses has two horns coming out of his head, doesn't it? That's because Michelangelo was an incredible sculptor, but he was lousy at Hebrew. And the word for horns can also have the idea of beams. Remember, Moses' face shone. And so Michelangelo thought that the beams were horns, and he stuck them right on Moses' head. So he is not a mutant from Marvel Comics, but that's basically the way that happened. We're going to be talking this morning related to Moses. I'm going to use the archaic term click to let the back know to move things up, because I don't think there's a mover here.
That's it.
Oh, that's it. Well, technology only works when you use it, right? Here we go. Ooh, it's blue. That's a good sign. There we go. I like history. And so sometimes I pop in a movie. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Lincoln. If you haven't, it's interesting. He asks the question in the movie, why is thus thus, and what is the nature of this thusness? And I sort of liked that line. You probably heard some about the Passover in terms of the Passover lamb and the meal. But have you thought about the connection between Moses and Messiah? This morning, we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at something related to the Passover, but instead of it being the lamb that was sacrificed or the meal, it's going to be the one who introduces the first Passover to the children of Israel, Moses, and how he relates to Messiah. Yeah? Good. Now, some of you, now see, you don't have that problem here because I saw people getting coffee. But sometimes I get in churches and the service is just a little bit earlier and I kind of see people end up dozing off. And we were taught in preaching class that you always need to take home truth. So if you look up there, if you should doze off, fear not. I have two ways of dealing with this. One, you get to keep the PowerPoint, and two, you get the takeoff truth at the beginning before you can doze. I'm going to see if the laser pointer works. This is a great morning. You can go, oh, I can go back. There we go. Whoa. I can go back again. Oh, that must be down. Okay, that's my problem. There we go. Down is up and up is down. There we go. Since Jesus is the greater Moses, he provides a greater redemption and it has greater authority. You're going to get some insight into the book of Hebrews this morning and what this all means. There we go. That's that intro. We don't need that. There's that. I got to remember, down is up and up is down. Okay. Turn with me to Deuteronomy 18. I was taught in preaching class that the PowerPoint is only suggested, it is not inspired, so I will fill in where the PowerPoint does not. That's the advantage of having me and not just having a PowerPoint. Okay? The background of this is Deuteronomy is really the last stuff that Moses ends up giving. It's really a series of messages before they prepare to cross into the land. Those 5 books of Moses, which Jews call the Torah, which actually means instruction, not law, are uniquely kind of fit together. Remember that the children of Israel had spent around 400 years in the pagan land of Egypt, where they had alligator-faced gods and sun gods and moon gods. And so Genesis is there to help the children of Israel understand more about the one true God and how they got from where they were to where they are. In other words, how did we end up in Egypt? Well, the end of Genesis puts them all over there. Exodus is designed to recount their leaving Egypt and the movement towards taking them as a group, a people group, an ethnic group, and starting to mold them into a nation. Leviticus is designed as a manual for the priests. We get to read everything that the priests were supposed to do and how they were supposed to do it. We get their manual. We get their instruction book. to learn about God and how he relates to his people corporately as a group and what he expects of his people in worship. Worship's still a topic these days. Pretty handy book to look at. Numbers is there because the children of Israel decided to take a 40-year detour through the beautiful land of the wilderness. I'm being facetious. Probably looks somewhat like the back part of Arizona. Not very attractive, and they decide to do a 40-year jaunt because they are not ready in heart to receive what God has for them. Deuteronomy is right before they enter the land, and it's Moses repeating the instructions of God for living in the land he's going to bring them to. This is getting near the end of Moses' life. Remember, Moses ends up not getting to go in the land. He gets to look at it from a mountain, but he never gets to enter into the inheritance that God had for his people. At least not first time. Check out the Mount of Transfiguration. He does get to enter the land, but it's a few thousand years later, and so God's very good at being very gracious. What's going to happen to these people? They have had Moses teaching them and guiding them this whole time. Moses is big in Jewish thought. We talk about Abraham, we talk about Moses, and we talk about David. Moses is Moses the teacher, Moses the instructor. In fact, that's the way he's even referred to by Jewish people today. Orthodox Jewish people will talk about our teacher, Moses. Moses Rabbeinu. Moses, our great rabbi. Moses, our great teacher, who brought for us God's revelation and his instruction. And the whole synagogue service is designed to recreate Sinai as far as this was the last time God talked to our people. We're going to remember that by pulling the scrolls out, moving them around, having them go down just as they came down off the mountain. We are remembering that we got the instruction of God from Moses. So he is a key figure, and the problem we face here is Moses is going to die. What do we do now? Who's going to give us instruction when we're in the land? How is this going to work? And Moses is a little concerned too, because these people get off track pretty quick. So, this is the big question as we look at 15. This is the background. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among the midst of your brethren. Him you will hear, according to all you desire of the Lord your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear the voice of the Lord my God. Let me not see this great fire anymore. When they got the law, it was scary. It made Halloween trick-or-treating look like nothing as far as it. Fire and smoke and a display of power from God that they were just not totally prepared for. By the way, God is letting them know that he's not like the deities of Egypt. And he is to be paid attention to. And so the Lord said to me, what they have spoken is good. They reverence me. They know I'm powerful. This is a good thing. This is an important thing. I will raise up for them a prophet like you, Moses, from among their brethren, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak them, and I will command him. And whatever it be that whomsoever will not hear my words, which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. Now that's God saying, look, I'm not leaving the children of Israel as an orphan. I will eventually raise up a prophet like you. But this is looking distant into the future. And we're going to see how this plays out. By the way, tests are given for a false prophet. It's not hard to spot a false prophet. The tests are given in Deuteronomy. Because the children of Israel say, how will we know if this is a prophet from you? How will we know if this guy is speaking in your name? And God says, well, it's real simple. First of all, he'll say things are going to happen and they don't happen. Real simple. The other thing is he'll make you chase after false gods. He'll teach things that don't match the revelation you've already been given. And so tests are actually given. So we're going to cover some points this morning. There was a prophet predicted by Moses. Moses pictures the coming Messiah, and the law of Christ is supreme because Messiah is the greater Moses. Now I've got to press the right button to make this work. Okay? We've gone here. I'm going to take a minute or two before we get to this slide to tell you why this is so important. It's going to be important for you personally, but it's very important in the world we live. I've had the opportunity to be broadcast into the Mideast live, finishing a degree in apologetics, and so I've been able to defend the gospel in terms of Islam, and I deal with it in terms of Orthodox Jews. Both groups do not believe that Messiah is the greater Moses. Not Messiah Jesus. Let me be clear about that. Jewish people don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, so they don't believe he's the greater Moses because they don't think he's anything, except maybe a great sage. On a good day, some Orthodox Jews will look at it that way. The Muslims believe that these verses I read refer to Muhammad. You realize that? If you run into a Muslim, he'll say, there is a prophecy of Muhammad in your Bible, you silly Christians. Why don't you get it? And they'll turn to Deuteronomy 18 and they'll say, oh, a prophet like Moses from among his brethren. The brethren of the Jewish people are the Ishmaelites. See, it's Muhammad. You're going to see that Muhammad doesn't look anything like Moses, and Jesus has a great deal in common. How do I know that this Deuteronomy 18 passage, 18 through 19, refers to Messiah Jesus? Now I'm going to use Christ and Messiah interchangeably. One's Greek, one's Hebrew. Don't be put off. I'm not using a title that's not given to him, but understand that when Deuteronomy was written, it was not written in Koine Greek. Fortunately, we have the Septuagint, which is very handy. It's a Greek translation of the Old Testament, and it's great for correlating Hebrew terms with their Greek terms and doing wonderful word studies, which I love doing. But the point is, when Moses writes this, Koine Greek was not on his radar screen. So Christ is from the Greek, Messiah is from the Hebrew. It's just a linguistic difference. Jeff, you Christians, and this is what an Orthodox Jew would say, he said, you Christians read things into the first 5 books of Moses in the Old Testament that were never intended. The problem with Christians, they would say, is that you just misinterpret our book. That's a problem. You know, we know what it means, and you guys have just kind of added. How do I know that that's not the case? Now, I know that's not the case, but I'm going to give you ways of knowing that's not the case, because you need to leave this church firm in your faith, understanding why you believe what you believe. Because the world out there doesn't believe it, and they will challenge you.
Amen.
Okay, Acts 3, 22 and 23. You have Peter talking. What does he say? Moses truly said, your fathers, the Lord your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren, and him you shall hear in all things. Whatever he says to you shall be, that every soul that will not hear that prophet will be utterly destroyed from among his people. Peter's probably quoting the Septuagint version of the Old Testament. That's why you sometimes see different wordings in those quotes. Again, it's that linguistic translate Hebrew into Greek thing. Okay? What's so significant about this is, who did Peter spend his time with? Peter spent his time with Jesus. Now, in those days, they did not have earphones and iPods. Actually, we've moved beyond that. We now have smartphones for not so smart people.
Amen.
Okay. And what do you think happened? Well, they had long walks. And so they talked about the scriptures. We know that because of the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Jesus didn't discuss just current events with those guys. He discussed the scriptures. A lot of discipleship occurred while they were wearing out sandal leather on their way from place to place. That's the way it worked. They saw Jesus, they walked with Jesus, they talked about things with Jesus, they shared things with each other, and they got Jesus' commentary on their life. And so Peter is not somebody who's just got educated. He's somebody who, one, grew up with the scriptures, and two, had time with the master. Who does he associate this prophecy with? In the context, he is preaching Christ, and he associates it with Christ. In other words, a fully educated Jewish person in Jesus' day would have had no trouble associating that prophecy with Messiah, and Peter, who walked with Jesus, had no problem associating Deuteronomy 18:15 all the way to the end of that section with Jesus. I didn't create the interpretation. By the way, in that day, this prophecy in Deuteronomy, that 18 section that we were looking at, 15 and on, was associated with Messiah even by some of the rabbis. I mean, it was not unheard of to find that sort of interpretation being around. Whether it's earlier rabbinical commentaries or later, there is some reference to Messiah being greater than Moses. So am I reading things in because I just want to? No, I'm reading what was understood by the disciples who walked with Jesus, who were fully immersed in hearing the Old Testament on a regular basis. Peter went to synagogue. It was publicly read. This is not a new idea that Christians have made up. But in what way is Messiah like Moses? We talk about types. What's the correspondence? What do they have in common with each other? Well, that's where I go here. Now, I deliberately pick the qualities of Moses shared with Jesus that make him anything but Muhammad. I was very deliberate. That's called apologetics. Showing somebody why their reasoning is totally out to lunch while you're taking them out to lunch. That's apologetics. And so, basically, that's why I did this. So I am a little deliberate. We will have to, not in the slides, but we will have to discuss a way that Jesus cannot be like Moses, because they will point it out. Muslims believe that the Bible you have has been corrupted by other Christians and Jews, otherwise it would agree with the Quran. That's how they deal with the Quran, not agreeing with your Bible. It's real simple. The Quran's the correction and you got it wrong. Wrong answer. And let's look at this. Moses firmly upheld the authority of scriptural revelation. In other words, even though Jesus had more scripture than Moses did, because the prophets had written, both of them were firmly convinced that what they had received in the part of the Bible that they had, and you're walking around with a complete Bible, complete with binding in red letters. And I'm sorry, there was no red letter Hebrew edition. Okay? And I understand that. You have all of God's revelation at your fingertips. Daniel did not. We call that progressive revelation. Okay? God has given more information over time until there's something called the complete canon. Okay? I know there's nothing to be added. My Bible's complete. And you're going to see why. Part of it has to do with the law of Messiah. Like, you can see this. Now, where does Moses say stuff like this? Okay? He talks about the commandments and his statutes written in the what? Book of the law. So what Moses had, the book of the law, he was firmly convinced was the word of God. By the way, this is why I can rule out the rabbis. They talk about an oral law that was given secretly, called the Talmud, or became the Talmud. There's no secret oral law handed down that the rabbis wrote. That's crazy. What Moses wrote in the Torah, the book of the law, he completely wrote down. Okay? Now, what did Jesus think? Was the Bible inspired up to the point he had it? Do not think I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. By the way, understand that means the whole thing. Okay? Jews divided their Bible into the law, the prophets, and the writings. And I could say the law and the prophets, and I'm referring to the whole thing. It's a type of, heaven and earth. All things in heaven and earth doesn't mean that the things that are flying around like the geese aren't included. Okay? It means the whole thing. Jesus believed that it was all inspired. Okay? Not heaven and earth will pass away before a jot or a tittle by no means will pass away from the law until all is fulfilled. Hebrew letter called a yud. It's a real tiny thing the size of a comma, or the top of a Hebrew letter, a jot or a tittle. Did Jesus walk around believing that the Bible had been corrupted, and he was waiting around for Muhammad to get some sort of correction 600 years later? This is crazy. Absolutely not. So when it came to the inspiration of the scriptures, Moses was convinced and Jesus is convinced. By the way, that's why everybody who follows Jesus ought to be convinced. There are a lot of reasons to be convinced, but one really good one is I have some really strong testimony that this book is totally solid. Okay. Both ministered to the children of Israel. Now, why is this important? Muhammad has never done any favor to the children of Israel yet, and he still isn't doing any favor to them. Okay? He is doing absolutely none. If you're going to claim that the greater Moses is Muhammad, then he needs to do the things that Moses did. What did Moses do for a living? What's his job description when he stopped watching sheep? Well, you can see here that he was chosen to bring, according to God, the children of Israel out of Egypt. By the way, did he fulfill his job function? He more than fulfilled his job function. He was faithful, we're going to see, as a servant in the household of God. He did what he was supposed to do. Now, Jesus' mission was far bigger than Israel. I know that, you know that. That's why you're sitting here today. But it doesn't mean it never ever touched Israel. So it was greater than, but not less than. Okay? And so there you see. Now, this is an interesting passage, and I'm going to help kind of unpack it a little, because I don't want you guys walking away with stuff your pastor has to clean up afterwards. I don't make messes in other people's churches. Behold, a woman of Canaan, by the way, Canaan, she was a Canaanite. That's kind of interesting. Or in that region, cried out to him, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, son of David." That's a messianic term. "My daughter is severely demon-possessed." And he answered her and said, not a word. And the disciples came and urged him, "Send her away, for she cries out after us." But he answered and said, "I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the tribe of Israel." Now let me be very clear. The church is bigger than this, but at this point, Jesus is functioning on the part of his mission where he's to offer the kingdom to the nation. Did he minister to Israel? Yes. Did Moses minister to the children of Israel? Yes. Did Jesus minister to the children of Israel? Yes. Did Muhammad minister to the children of Israel? Never. By the way, this is good for Orthodox rabbis. Look who Jesus was sent to, because they like to say Christianity is a great religion for people who aren't Jewish, just you stay away from it. And I'll say, well, no, really, that's not quite right, because Jesus didn't tell me to stay away from you. That's not what it was about. He interceded. Now, we're going to have to take a little bit of time. That's a fancy word for pleaded or prayed for. Okay? Did Moses do that? This is an incredible passage. You ever get mad at people? If you're in ministry, people don't always do what you want. It can be a frustrating thing. Hopefully you guys are real blessing to your pastor, and I trust that you are. But ministry is complicated, and people are complicated, and lives are complicated, and that just means it's all complicated. And so that's just the way it is. These guys committed a sin. They did the golden calf. People don't understand why they did the golden calf. What are you doing, making a calf? You just came from Egypt. That's the problem. They just came from Egypt. God had taken them out of Egypt, but he hadn't gotten all the Egypt out of the people. Why a cow? Why not a horse? I mean, horses are beautiful. Why not an eagle? It flies. That's cool. A cow. You guys all have seen cows, right? No. The children of Israel decided to worship a golden cow. Isn't that impressive? You think, why a cow? They were not trying to set up a different deity. They were trying to set up a representation of the one true deity. God has not spoken. Moses is gone. We need something. We need something. We're scared to death. We need something to rely on. That's what people do, right? And so they built a golden calf because oxen represented strength. So they're thinking, God was strong. He brought us out of Egypt. He showed his strength. What's a symbol of strength? A cow. An ox. What's the problem? Oxes are stupid. God is not dumb. That's the problem with an image. You can't capture the glory of God with something you're going to build with your hands. So they messed up. So what does Moses do? Smite them real good, right? He says, "So now I go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for you." The perhaps is there for a reason, right? Then Moses returned and said to the Lord, returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, these people have committed a great sin and made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, if not, I pray, blot me out of the book which you've written." Now, he's not asking per se. There's a thought about that probably being, he's saying, go ahead and kill me. If you're not going to forgive these people, you might as well just take my life. My life for their sin. Isn't that cool? He's willing to die for the sake of the people being forgiven. Where have we seen that? I put a lament up here. Jesus prays over Jerusalem. Okay? And he compares them and says, I wanted to gather you to me, but you would not. Can people be disobedient? They sure can. You would not. You were unwilling. Okay? Now you say, well, that's not really praying for them. Well, the form of this particular saying in literature is a lament. And a lament is a plaintive cry in relation to another. So a lament is not just, he's not just stating the weather report. I would have liked you to come. No, this is a plaintive cry on behalf of Jerusalem. Muhammad ever complained, cry over Jerusalem? Yeah, he cried he couldn't have it. That's about the only cry you'd see from Muhammad. In fact, to this day, those who follow him have no great love for seeing Jerusalem restored to God. They would like it as a personal possession. As far as they're concerned, it should fall under the house of Islam. This is completely different here. Look at Jesus' attitude. Look at Moses. They both intercede for Israel. Now, Jesus has got a bigger job than Moses has, but he doesn't have a lesser job than Moses has. He's just taken on that much more because he's that much greater. But he isn't lesser. What about judgment? It's amazing to me that people don't understand that Jesus spoke more about judgment. If you want to discuss divine judgment, the New Testament has more to say about divine judgment than the Old does, at least as far as hell, and the exact nature of that. If you want to look at the number of times the Greek Old Testament mentions an eternal punishment or an eternal separation from God, you're going to find the New Testament spends more time. Now, I only say that because everybody likes Jesus to be nice, but no one likes him to be just. That's not where our society's at. And so it's kind of interesting. Does Moses talk about judgment? Yeah, he says, look, if your heart turns away and you don't hear and you're drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I announce to you this day, you will surely perish. Amen. You do not get the option of being redeemed by God to go ahead and serve other gods. Not going to happen. There's a covenant relationship here, and if you don't worship him, he's going to act ethically. He is not like the Egyptian gods. He is ethical. He is good. You will perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land which you cross over the Jordan to go in and possess. You get the land, you also get judgment if you don't do what's said. Okay? Look at this. He's near the city. This is another account of his lament over Jerusalem. Now, Luke is a little more chronological and a little bit detailed. Luke is our historian, doctor guy. Okay? Matthew's using motifs, pictures. And he's speaking to his people the way he speaks. The Gospels aren't in conflict, they just have different audiences. Romans want to know where the action is. They're into the action flicks. And they want an action film. And so Mark keeps saying, and then it happened, and then it happened, and then there was an explosion, and then there was another scene. And that's Mark, because the Romans liked that sort of thing. Jesus was the servant, that made sense to the Romans, and an action flick made sense to the Romans. Luke is the Greek guy. He's all organized, categorized, systematic, chronological. He's writing this for somebody. This is how it all happened. So he gives more detail here. And he drew near and he wept over the city, and he goes ahead and he talks about punishment. Look at this. For the day will come when your enemies will build an embankment around you and surround you and close you in from every side and level you and the children within you to the ground, and they shall not leave one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. Jesus says to Jerusalem, you will be judged for not recognizing your Messiah. This is probably the only thing that Muhammad even comes close to being even close to any sort of Moses in. Because Islam really likes the judgment side of things. But the God who's doing the judging isn't very ethical either. That's another sermon for another time. Okay? This is so important. What did Moses give? Moses gave instruction that contained forms. And I'm doing my dissertation, and part of it is on the newness of the new covenant. And I'm actually working on that dissertation when I'm not doing other things, and learning how hard it is to write a book. I have a new respect for authors. I jokingly say that writing a book is as close to as a man can come to giving birth. It's real work. And I'm in labor over my dissertation. But here's the thing you need to remember. Moses gave statutes and judgments. He gave forms and holidays and a calendar to the children of Israel. He gave ordinances to the children of Israel. Now this is where it gets real important. This is the Lord's Supper here. I took the Lukean account. Who instituted the Lord's Supper? Who instituted communion? Who instituted that stuff? People didn't celebrate communion on a regular basis. This is all new stuff. The disciples are all of a sudden given new things to do, that they're to do differently. He gave commands that were not part of the Old Testament. There was no do this in remembrance of me. And yes, there was a connection between the Seder and the Last Supper. Obviously there was. But the point is, there was no do this in remembrance of me when Moses gave the children of Israel the Passover. It was so that you might remember the redemption you received from Israel. But it wasn't do this in remembrance of Moses. This is a new form. By the way, where there's new forms, there's new law, there's new Torah, there's new instruction. How do you know the new covenant's not just a repeat of the old? That's why I'm writing my dissertation. One of the ways you know is new forms are given, new instructions given. A new covenant would have new instruction. It would have new forms. If it was just a repeat of the old, there would be no new forms. Did Muhammad give new forms? Well, yeah. As I look at the Quran, it's not so much, He certainly didn't bring a new covenant. Okay. Whoops. Okay, I'm trying to figure out which way is up. Okay. That is this way. Okay. And of course he gave instruction. I do want to mention the motif. Have you guys ever thought about why 12 disciples on a mount, getting the Sermon on the Mount? Why does Matthew do that? The other Gospels don't put all of Matthew's teaching together. Why does Matthew do that? 12 tribes of Israel on the mountain receiving the law of God. 12 disciples on the Mount of Olives, on the Mount, receiving the new Torah from the new Messiah. Matthew's doing this deliberately. As it was with Moses, so it is with Messiah. Matthew's deliberately doing that. He wants them to think back to Sinai and realize that something new has happened, new instruction is being given, a new lawgiver is in town, new material and revelations being given. And it's a contrast between the law and the law of Christ being given. Now that process starts there. It doesn't end there. We have epistles. Remember, after Acts 2, the church gets started, and it's a whole new ballgame with new problems. But you need to see that. Okay, why is this important? I told you one of the reasons. Don't ever let a Muslim get away with it. Don't. I won't. I'm going to California to do a series of things. I'll be covering how we know the Bible can be trusted, my own testimony, goodness gracious, why the need for atonement, a bunch of topics. The Trinity in the Old Testament, which is a problem my people share who are unsaved and Muslims have, is a real problem with plurality in Godhead. Okay? Muhammad has never prophesied in your Bible. That's because he's not supposed to be a part of it. That's it. Okay? He's 600 years later. He's got a bad knowledge of his Bible. Knows something about Jews and Christians because there were some tribes running around. The gospel did not really reach that area of the world very well. And he's getting it from a caravan third hand. Okay? The Quran is messy. It's not organized like your Bible. Most Muslims don't even know what the Quran really understand at all. Okay? So don't buy it. That's the laser clicker. Okay? Jewish people. Jewish people honestly believe, at least the super Orthodox, in a series of statements that were given during the 11th century. Remember that when the temple was destroyed, Judaism got revamped, the rabbis got control of Judaism and became rabbinical Judaism. It was not exactly the same as biblical faith. And some guy named Moses Maimonides later on said, you know what, I got to figure out a statement because everyone's asking us what we believe. Muslims are asking what us believe. Christians are asking us what we believe. We don't have any statement of faith at all. You will never find one in the synagogue. We probably should have an answer. Now, attempts had been done before that, but he decides he's going to be the great systemizer of Judaism. I'm going to organize this. Very organized guy. And he creates these 13 articles. And so look at one of the articles. The Torah is unchangeable. Nothing can be added or subtracted, nor will there be another Torah from the Creator. Jewish people can't regard the New Testament as inspired as long as they hold on to that. As long as there is no new Torah, as long as there is no new law that God can ever give, ever, or change anything in the 5 books as far as what's commanded, they cannot receive. So they have to know who Messiah is. They have to know that there is a new law, there is a new covenant, there is a new Torah given by Messiah, which they must accept. In other words, the new covenant is not optional. And they need to understand that. And they need to understand that that changes things. We are not adding Jesus to the rabbis. If you add Jesus to the rabbis, you have neither Jesus nor have you the rabbis. It is grape nuts. Okay? Jesus is not an add-in to another religious system. He is the Lord of heaven and earth. He is the Messiah. And he is the King. Amen. And so you cannot just slap him on with the rabbis, and some people try to do that. They try to smear, it's like the rabbis are the bagel, and they try to smear Jesus on as if he was cream cheese. And it does not work. So Jewish people must know, yes, we have regard for the 5 books of Moses, don't we? But there is a greater Torah, there is a greater instruction being given by the greater Moses. Heed his words. It is an obedience issue. It is an apologetics issue. It is a teaching issue. But it is ultimately an obedience issue. Either Jesus is the king and I follow him, or the rabbis are in charge and I follow them. But it in both. Where the rabbis are right, they're right. Just like a clock. A broken clock is right twice a day. That's fine. But they are not the authority. Now let's get into the book of Hebrews. If you want to understand Hebrews, you need to read Leviticus. Hebrews is key to that book. This gets so fun. And this is where it starts getting into stuff for us. I'm going to go through this and then we're going to get application. I'm not going to take you through the entire book of Hebrews. Just as Deuteronomy is a series of sermons, Hebrews was written as a series of sermons. It was meant to be preached. It is not like a Pauline letter where Paul gives all the theology and then he says, this is what you're supposed to do about it. Hebrews is different. Okay? You'll find it near the end. First 3 chapters of Hebrews. 3 outline. Okay? You have doctrine and you have a warning. This is a sermon. Here's the theology, here's the application in each section with a series of warnings. The danger is these guys were going to do exactly what they said. They were going to treat Jesus like the cream cheese on the bagel. And the book of Hebrews is written to say, you don't do that. You lose. Essentially, it's Jesus plus anything is not Jesus. In 1, Jesus is God. Why is he greater than the Old Testament sacrificial system and all the ceremonial laws? Because he's God and Moses isn't. 2, he's human. Okay? That becomes important. Jesus' humanity is doctrinally vital for us to maintain. He's not from a distance, like the old song. Okay? 3, he is greater than Moses. Particularly in the latter part of 3. Okay? Actually, in the beginning part of 3, it's stressed. Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider the apostle and high priest of our confession. who was faithful to him who appointed him, as Moses was faithful in his house. But this one is counted worthy of greater glory than Moses. See the comparison the writer of Hebrews is making with Moses and saying that Messiah is greater? Why is he greater? He who built the house has more honor than the house. Every house is built by someone. By the way, that's a great apologetics argument for the existence of God. Everything that's made was made by somebody. I heard a great debate, Stephen Hawkins, where he said, basically the universe was made by nothing, and the nothing was a really interesting something. It's like, for a really bright man, you're really being stupid right now. Okay. Everything was built by someone. Moses is not the same as Christ. The one who built the house is of greater honor than the one who serves in the house. The son, inheritor, is of greater honor than the servants in the house. They understood that sort of thinking. And Moses indeed was faithful in all his house as a servant, for a testimony to those things which would be spoken afterwards. But Christ as a son over his own house. And the point the writer of Hebrews is making is, Jesus is the greater Moses. He is worthy of greater honor because the house rightfully belongs to him. Moses served in the house according to the plan of God, but the house belongs to Jesus. He is the inheritor of the house. He is the creator of the house because he's God. That's a reference back to one. It's truth. He also claims greater authority. Everyone reads the Great Commission and everyone stops short at the end of it. Or part of it. Actually, they stop short at the beginning of it. Sorry about that. Jesus came and spoke to them saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. How much authority has been given to Jesus? All. Good. All is all. All the time. You want a way to remember that? All is all the time. That's what all means. Did Moses ever say all authority was given to me on heaven and earth? Not and live to tell about it. Would have been dead. Moses never claimed all authority. Jesus is claiming all authority. Realize what he's saying here. This is the Jesus who was crucified. You couldn't get a more humiliating death under Roman law. Criminals were crucified. I mean, there were early pictures making fun of Jesus by unsaved Greeks and Romans. You're telling me that he was crucified. This is an ignoble death. And he's sitting there after the crucifixion and resurrection, and he just says, all authority is given to me. By the way, this is absolutely incredible for prayer. Pray according to Jesus' purposes, and what do you guarantee? He has the authority to do it. Use that in your prayer life. Lord, I'm asking this. I'm sure that missionaries spreading your word are in line with your gift. You said all authority was given to you. Show us your glory. This is cool stuff. I'm sorry. Do you know that Muhammad does not claim authority? He does not claim any such authority in the Quran. He doesn't even know where he's going when he dies. In the Hadith, those are vignettes of his life. Think of the Hadith as the Gospels for the Muslim. Okay, they're the Gospels of Muhammad's life. He states he does not know what Allah will do with him. Isn't that pathetic? You know, an interesting response to a Muslim is, why are you going to follow a guy who doesn't know where he's going? I'm following somebody who knows where they're going, and they know how to get me there. Amen. Why would you settle for a faith that promises you nothing for so much sacrifice? Should not you accept something that will get you where you want to go? It's like having a blind tour guide, for goodness sake. Okay. You've all received slips. I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to guide you through filling those out, tell you why those are important. And two, I'm going to tell you what's going on with our ministry. That is the only way you directly communicate with chosen people. I'm kind of the link between you and them. How do they hear from you? They hear from you through those slips. Are they important to fill out? Yeah. One was given for each family. If you could please fill those out. Dirty fingernails don't work, but pens do. Pencils do. I'm sorry, we don't have an electronic form, like a credit card thing, okay? We have not invented the electronic PDF, pass out of a slip yet. Those are going to be turned in, okay? Those go back to me, the part that rips, the discovered perforation. It's one of the greatest inventions in missions. But after 120 years, Chosen People has done that. Please fill those out. Please take the time to fill those out. They allow me to be in touch with you. They allow you to be in touch with me. They also let Chosen People know that, hey, a message on how Messiah is greater than Moses really is kind of a cool thing to have in the church. So that's your feedback. How many of you guys can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time? Okay, good. I'm going to give you a few minutes to start filling this out. I'm going to tell you what's going on with us. Some of you have filled that out, others still are. Hopefully you can listen while you fill this out. I'll start filling you in a little on what's going on with us. We do have a website, www.zionsbanner.com. Org. I always get my dots separated. I guess I'm org, not a com, because they're not commercial. And I'm not an EDU yet, which is education. So I guess I get stuck with org. There are free videos on there. There's free material. If you are like really into the internet and you just love serving, there's me being on Arabic television. I posted all that stuff. That's all available to you. Those are goodies that we just love to make. We have been in Phoenix for about 6 years now. It is so good to get back here. The cactus do not change color except when they're dying. So we have missed that incredibly. If you go up, you do get cooler weather and stuff, but the mountains is mostly pine trees. So you can forget maple. Maple syrup in Arizona is generally fake. So I'll warn you, if you go have pancakes, that's what you're going to get. Some things have changed with our ministry. One of the fellowships that was supporting us is a great fellowship for churches, but they've decided that it didn't quite lead to a church with Jewish people as quick as they thought. So we're going to see about a 50% drop in funding. That's just the way it is. Chosen People exists to share and disciple Jewish people and teach others to do likewise. Do we want to see churches form? Yeah, we do. But sometimes we realize that it might be cool to have a bunch of Jewish people saved and start discipling, and maybe we don't get to choose where they go afterwards. This particular fellowship didn't sort of like the broadness of that. We wanted things a little tighter. So we are experiencing a possible 50% drop. That's okay. God brings ministry partners along and He removes the ministry partners. That is just the way it is. So our traveling companions may change a little. We're also looking at redeployment. Phoenix has been good, but Chosen People says, you know, you're very theologically conservative and you sort of know New England and you sort of grew up in the Midwest, and we might be able to make better use of you than Phoenix, because Phoenix is getting a lot of Jewish missions there, and you might be better served if we made use of your background as far as where you grew up. I spent 20 years in New England. They're looking at, we can stay in Phoenix, but they'd say you need to revamp your ministry a little. There's some advantages to that. There's also the Catskills. My girls think, wow, trees that change again in green. So we're looking at that. They also talked to us about Detroit. So we've still got Phoenix, but redeployment to the Catskills and Detroit look really good. And then they talked to us about New England a little bit, but there are a lot of details. That would be more of a traveling ministry. I'd have to constantly be going. And I wouldn't have as much as a home base, so we don't know what that all means. But that lets you know. Missionaries get redeployed, support wanes, things like that happen. That's where we're at. So we may be closer to your area in the future, which is only about 5 hours away. You can do the Catskills to here. My son is up here, and he's preaching at a church on Matthew 5. So we were comparing preaching notes. The two preacher boys were sitting around discussing some of the same topics, which is really cool. So we've got connections here. Okay, I gotta figure out which way. Okay. You go there. Jesus ministered to Israel, you can minister to Israel too. Through those slips, through being connected with us, we offer you that opportunity. Because that's the way it is. God's decided to fund his work through people. He could just drop it down, but it's not the way he does it. That's why I mentioned those things. Let's get to some stuff that you can take out of here. Okay. Obey. That sounds like a great church message. Okay. Why do I obey Jesus? Well, there are a lot of reasons given in Scripture. One, he purchased you by his redemption. You can see a bunch of other sermons on it. But here's the cool thing. His instruction's final. There's no Book of Mormon to be added. There's no Quran to be added. There's nothing to be added. His instructions are final.
Amen.
You don't have to wait for the next installment in the book. You obey because he is the final authority. Okay? He's the referee that's going to judge the game in the end. And that's a real good reason to obey. I know it sounds easier than it is to live out. But you need motivation. The world around you is trying to bend you into its mold. I was firmly convinced growing up that there were two genders, male and female. Now, all of a sudden, there are 16. I'm getting kind of confused. Okay? Life was simple for me. The world is a weird place right now. You just have to listen to news for a little while. You can surf the internet, you can find all sorts of strange things out there. There's even weird doctrines out there that you wouldn't believe if you heard them, that are strange, that in apologetics I'm having to deal with. Really bizarre stuff. And so you need to understand that you have the truth, you have the final installment, and if you stick to this path, you will be okay. You will be fine. You will be doing the right thing. You will not be misled. Jesus' authority is final, and so everything in this book is backed up by the final authority. This is a good thing. Okay? You can succeed. Here's the funny thing about the law of Moses. It said to Israel, do in order that you might experience God's acceptance. The gospel is cool. It says you are accepted so that you might do. What incredible good news. And here's what that means. You have the power to succeed in the Christian life because the person who is helping you, who you're appealing to for the things you need, has the authority to do what you're asking.
Amen.
He can change hearts because he has all authority in heaven and earth. Human beings can't change hearts because they don't have all authority in heaven and earth. We can try, and then God has to work from there. How does a Jewish person get saved? He gets saved because God saves him. That's the way it works. Okay? God does the regenerating work. Now, he uses us, and he uses things we do, and he uses apologetics, and he uses reason. Why not? He's the God of reason. But in the end result, it is appealing to Jesus' authority. You can live the Christian life because the final authority has all authority to help you live this life.
Amen.
This is very practical. So yes, you must obey, but you can obey. That's the good news. I didn't say it was easy. I just said you could. The easy part is it's not. Because you're in a fallen world, in a body that still has a propensity towards sin, dealing with other people who all have propensities towards sin, and you're all kind of rubbing shoulders with each other in this world. But Jesus can help you. That's the bottom line. And I did that, and oh, I'm pressing the wrong line. You know what this means? This means we're at the end of our slideshow. That's what that means. So it was great being up here. Remember, obey, and Jesus has the authority to help you. And rejoice.